It's April 2020, and I'm sitting on the sofa next to the father of my twins, my twin boys, who had turned 2 just as lockdown had begun. And I was frightened. I was thinking, is this virus going to endanger my babies? How am I going to work if there's no childcare? What about Jan, the elderly neighbour who lives next door? How's she going to cope? I needed to talk and to be heard. And he was on his phone. He was scrolling and he was sharing funnies and memes in the many WhatsApp groups that he was part of. And he did try and listen to me, but then his phone pinged and he was straight back in with a chuckle to his WhatsApp groups. And I still, here, telling you this story right now today, I remember the flavour of that feeling, the feeling of isolation and loneliness next to somebody who was feeling so connected in that moment. And I said, never mind. And I went upstairs and had a bath. So an opportunity for connection had been lost. Now, why am I telling you this very personal story today? Well, for me, I think it illustrates some of the disconnection that we're seeing everywhere around us today. And you might relate to some of these images. And what I want to do with this talk is explore how this disconnection that we're seeing is arising, and also look at how it might play out for us as we move into the 21st century. And specifically, I want to ask, what's changing in our brains when we have excessive screen time? Secondly, how do those changes then impact our ability to connect with each other? And then thirdly, ask what might be the longer term consequences for that as we face the challenges of the 21st century. And so as not to leave you in a real dystopian sense of despair, at the end I will of course be sharing some gloriously simple ways that we can remedy some of this. I'd like to ask you to bring to mind a young person who is special to you, maybe sort of around 10 or under, primary age child. It might be your child, grandchild, a friend's child, but if you can just hold them in mind and also think of something about them that makes you smile. So has everybody got someone in mind? A young person who's special. And if anyone's feeling brave, maybe they might shout out the name, 2 or 3 names of those young people. Gregory, Caitlin, Fergus. So we've got Gregory, Caitlin, Fergus, and many other young people. And I want us to kind of hold them with us this afternoon as we spend this time together. I work as a psychotherapist and a parent coach, working with families where screen time has become a serious issue in the family. And so therefore, this question of human connection is one that I'm dealing with all the time. I want to introduce you to Rachel. Rachel is on the right here. Now, Rachel is a teenage girl, and she's sitting there with one of her very close friends, and her friend is telling her something that has just happened to her to do with a school bully, and she's feeling like she really needs to be heard by her friend. What is going on in Rachel's brain that means she cannot listen to her friend? Her friend is one of her close friends, and yet she can't seem to focus on her. Now, we need to know that Rachel spends a lot of time in what I call highly stimulating digital environments. So she's in a lot of these apps all the time. She's very good on them. She gets lots of likes. It feels great. But when she's sitting with her friend, in a nutshell, what's happening here is she is having a dopamine withdrawal. She is not getting the hits that she is used to. This is what we would call a low stimulation activity for her. And so she's starting to feel itchy and twitchy, and her phone is just out of sight on the table there, and her eyes keep flicking to it, and her body seems agitated. She cannot be present with her friend. Now, these are the signs of an addict. I'm using words like withdrawal. We have started to hear terms like dopamine addiction, dopamine detox. Some people go on dopamine detoxes now. And what I want to do today is pause there with dopamine and actually say, what is happening with our dopamine system when we're in these highly stimulating digital environments, and help us understand a little bit more about how a natural system, because it is a natural reward system in our brains, how that has been hacked. We're going to look at a pre-digital brain and a digital brain. I was going to say post-digital brain, but it's not. It still is digital brain now. So pre-digital brain and digital brain. So we've got a brain here. So we've got a kind of brain stem, and we've got an old brain, and we've got a prefrontal cortex. And this is Sue. So this is our pre-digital brain. And she is actually, this is Rachel's brain, and this is Rachel's mom, turns out. So here's Sue, and here's Rachel. So we're going to look at the pre-digital brain first. So what is happening over here? This brain has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, as have all of your brains here. And as humans, we are always seeking out survival experiences. That is our main mandate, to survive. So we seek out food, sex, positive social connection. We seek out tasks that need to get ticked off. We are always seeking out survival behaviours. And what we get every time we're seeking one of those is a kind of news flash from the front of our brain to the old brain saying, incoming donut, incoming hug, incoming tick off the list. And every time we get one of those little news flashes, we get a hit of dopamine, and it feels really good in our body, a real nice sense of kind of like good focus. And so we love the feeling of dopamine. And that feeling has been evolving in us over hundreds of thousands of years, and it has been based on maybe, I don't know, five times we have food a day, maybe 5 to 10 times that we have a positive social interaction. So there's a certain number of times a day that we get these dopamine spikes, but it's not all the time. So in a way, this pre-digital brain has calibrated to that frequency of dopamine. So it might have a dopamine baseline somewhere down here, and there's absolutely no anatomical basis whatsoever for me putting my finger here. But there we have a dopamine baseline in the pre-digital brain over here. And so when that brain is not getting the hits of dopamine, it has capacity to pay attention to other things, and in relation to this talk in particular, to other humans, to the people that it cares about and it wants to listen to and connect with. So here we have the pre-digital brain with a dopamine level that allows us to connect with other. And in a way, I think, as a psychotherapist, I think about this incredible fact that we have evolved to be beings who have that space, headspace, we might say, to actually be able to connect with one another. So that's over here. So thank you very much, Sue. And we're going to come over here now to Rachel. So Rachel, who we saw up here, and this is her digital brain. Now, as we've seen, her brain is often in these high stimulating digital environments, and she is getting the hits of dopamine, and they are coming because she is getting one of the best survival hits you can get, which is being liked, belonging, feeling safe. So it's playing right into something that we really need, and this is where the kind of the hacking starts to come in. So she's getting all of these dopamine hits, and it feels really, really good, but of course the baseline in this brain is rising. This brain needs more dopamine to feel like it's normal. So that's what's going on in Rachel's brain. And the increased dopamine flowing through the brain has another important impact on the brain too. So this is the prefrontal cortex of this brain here. The more dopamine that we have flowing through our brain, the less effective our prefrontal cortex becomes. So if you think about when you're kind of trying to get to something and there's something you need to get to, maybe you might make rash decisions. We have less ability to involve our prefrontal cortex is less involved in making decisions when we are chasing a dopamine hit or when we are in that state. So actually, Rachel's brain has got two things that have changed in it: a higher baseline and an impaired, slightly offline prefrontal cortex. Just give a little demonstration of that as well so you can see. So the pre-digital brain, normal dopamine baseline, raised dopamine baseline, and prefrontal cortex less involved in the digital brain. Those are the differences that we see in a brain that's being exposed to these high stimulation environments all the time. We're going to go back to Rachel, and what we now know, you've had a kind of rapid neuroscience lesson there, what we now know about what's gone on in Rachel's brain is that she has got a dopamine deficit going on. She is in a withdrawal state. She is struggling because she's not getting the hits of dopamine that she needs. She's also not got the ability to make sort of more sensible decisions in her brain. So she is feeling agitated and irritable and maybe even annoyed at her friend for telling her about this bullying or whatever it is that's just gone on. What she doesn't know is that she is being hijacked internally by a warning system. So her brain has registered that there are lower levels of dopamine than normal. Dopamine equates to survival. Her brain goes into a panic state. It starts to send out warnings saying, you are going to die. You are going to die. Your survival is at risk. And what it's saying to her, she'll have this inner voice saying, look at your phone, get more dopamine. Look at your phone, get more dopamine. So she's having this messaging coming from within her old brain, her survival brain. And very sadly, the prefrontal cortex, who, if I was going to give it a voice, I would imagine it might say something like, Rachel, your friend's right here. She's a real person. She's a real possibility of long-term friendship. She's far better than TikTok likes. But unfortunately, that prefrontal cortex is not there. It's not available to her. So what does she do? She succumbs. She picks up her phone. She swipes up, and another opportunity for connection is lost. So what might be the wider consequences of this kind of disconnection which we're seeing everywhere in our society. Rachel may grow up, if this pattern of choosing the digital world over the real world continues through her teenage years, she may struggle to form strong connections with her friends. She may grow up with a sense of feeling lonely inside. She may end up finding it hard to make connections with people as she gets older. And as we head into the 21st century with the challenges that it entrains, she may find herself in situations where she may need to turn to her neighbours for help. She may not know how to make those social ties. She may find that she's in situations like we've had recently here, power outages after storms. Again, will she be able to make those connections that she needs to make in order to deal with adversity and challenges that lie ahead? And what if it's not just Rachel, and not just all of Rachel's friends, but an entire generation of young people who are consistently experiencing this high dopamine baseline and this inability to connect? What does that look like? What happens if we have a society where young people do not know how to make connections with each other? They therefore grow up into a society that has a much more fragile social fabric, and the adversity that we may face is far harder for those people to navigate together. Research tells us that communities, societies, species who can cooperate and who can work together are far better at dealing with adversity, at coming together when things get tough. And if there's one thing that we need where we're going as a species, it is resilience. And that resilience, I would argue, is being undermined and compromised by the addiction that we have to particularly these highly stimulating digital environments. I'm coming to the end of the talk now, and I want to ask you to bring back to mind those young people that we had earlier. So we had Fergus, we had Caitlin, and we had Gregory. Apologies, Gregory. And all those young people that we had in mind, bring them back into your minds now and ask yourself, what capacity for human connection do I want them to grow up with? Because we're talking about capacity for human connection here. We're talking about what the brain is able to do. So, and if you take away one thing from this talk with me today, it's that their dopamine level is set by the environment that their brain is exposed to. Yeah? So their dopamine level is set by the environment that their brain is exposed to. So finding a way to get things in balance rather than this extreme amount of time that young people are spending on screens. So my radical clarion call to you today as we look to ways that we can avoid some of these impacts as we move forward is to get out the Lego, get out the board games, and go to the park. And these apparently simple, mundane, everyday actions that you may take thinking they don't mean very much actually are doing three incredibly profound things. First of all, they are conserving that child's evolutionarily derived birthright to have a brain that's available for connection. So that's the first thing. Secondly, you are raising humans who, come the future pandemic, will sit on that sofa next to their partner and will be available to listen. And then thirdly, if you want to impact the way that we have, the amount of resilience that we have as a species in the 21st century, this is the way that you can do it. Thank you.